Let's get ready to rumble!
Oh my God! Unbelievable! Down goes Frazier! Down goes
Frazier! It's time! You're listening to New Mexico's only mixed martial arts and boxing podcast, The Low Blow, on AtomCombatSports.com and Fight Fans Radio. It is episode 182 of The Low Blow on Fight Fans Radio, USCombatSports.com, and SouthwestFight.com. You're listening to New Mexico's only mixed martial arts and boxing podcast, The Low Blow, on AtomCombatSports.com and Fight Fans Radio. It is episode 182 of The Low Blow on Fight Fans Radio, SouthwestFight.com, and USCombatSports.com. I am Justin Goodrum, joined by Jorge Hernandez. What's up, man?
Not much. We had to get you guys with the remix right there.
Yeah, 2 intros for the price of 1. On today's show, we're going to preview UFC 171. We're going to discuss the UFC card that took place last week, UFC Fight Night 37. Alexander Gustafsson getting his victory in England. We're going to preview this weekend's boxing matches featuring the main event of Danny Garcia against Mauricio Herrera. And we're going to preview the big UFC card, UFC 171, featuring the main event, Johnny Hendricks versus Robbie Lawler. We're tentatively hoping to have Holly Holm on the show. That's our tentative guest here. So over the next 30 to 45 minutes, we might have her on the show. We'll see what happens. But first, as always, you can get in touch with Fight Fans Radio through Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Ustream. Just typing in Fight Fans Radio. You can also follow us on Twitter through @TheLowBlow. Also, you can see all of our videos. I'm sure we're going to have a ton of more videos up featuring interviews from the Legacy SC card coming up in April on our YouTube page, youtube.com/lowblow505. And we're available always on email, lowblow505@gmail.com. And also we're available on Facebook, which our Facebook page has a video of Carlos Condit. It's about 2 minutes featuring, I think it's a New Mexico travel video, but it's featuring Carlos Condit, a incredible video. I don't know if you've seen this, Jorge, but it's probably one of the best produced videos I've ever seen New Mexico put on. It's unbelievable.
Locally, no, it does pump you up and give you the chills there at the end, especially, being New Mexican and recognizing a lot of those, areas around the desert and even here in the city. It's really well done.
Yeah.
One more thing, Jay.
Sure. What's up?
Your Twitter, damn it.
@JustinTime16. How about yours?
@Jorge de Burque. Thank you, Jay.
Okay. You're welcome. Yeah, we never put our Twitter handles up here. We don't know why. We always forget. So that business is handled. But while we're tentatively waiting for Holly Holm, she is in the news today specifically. Dana White was doing his annual UFC 171 media scrum, and her name came up. Basically in reference to the whole rumors with Joe Rogan in terms of this big women's MMA announcement that he was referring to a couple of weeks ago. Her name did come up, and Dana White did say that he is meeting with her this week in Dallas to discuss a potential deal, possibly. I guess with this news, and if we have her on, we'll ask her about this, but we've always talked about, the money being the main factor of Holly Holm making her way into the UFC. In terms of the negotiation table here, what is appropriate for Holly to do in this situation in terms of her and her management? Is it in her best interest to play the money game and to try to get as much money as possible? Or is it just for her to get into the UFC by kind of any means necessary, even if they kind of undervalue her, and then once she proves her worth, getting a better deal, her second contract?
Yeah, and I think both sides got to hear each other out. It's only fair. I know in Holly Holm's position, it's really unlike something we've ever seen in MMA or, I guess, women's MMA, where you have a big promotion involved. I'm wrong. I'm dead wrong on that. M1 Global and Fedor was the biggest thing, I think, where there was a second promotion company involved.
Sure.
Where that just randomly hit me. But it's similar to that situation. Obviously not to that scale, because Fedor arguably is one of the top 2-3 greatest fighters of all time. It's not on that level, but for WMMA, it is that level for them. So obviously both sides got to hear each other out, see what Dana has to present, see what Holly Holm and Lenny Fresquez, and of course Mike Winklejohn, who's playing in a pretty integral role, home striking coach, of course, in helping and assist the management of her. It's very interesting how this has all played out, especially after Joe Rogan has kind of been not necessarily reprimanded, but told to chill out on these big, hints at big announcements coming up. It was surprising that Joe Rogan would do something like that, but good to hear that Dana White is also keeping his commentators in check by saying, hey, you guys got to chill out.
Yeah, absolutely. Joe Rogan, he's excited, jumps the gun. You don't normally see him do that, so I'm sure that won't happen again. In terms of this at the negotiation table, who has the leverage? I mean, the UFC, they're searching for stars. It's kind of in a weird spot with Holly because she is a world champion. She's a very accomplished boxer, but she's not well known, and she's not a draw on pay-per-view because she hasn't been put on pay-per-view. She hasn't been put on major television. So who exactly has kind of the leverage in this deal? Because I think both sides kind of need each other at this point.
And I completely agree with you. That's what I was going to say. I think in a weird way, before we even go to the negotiation table, we're kind of at a stalemate when it comes to who does have the upper hand in this situation. One, because we know Holm is going to want to get paid. She retired from boxing where she was making a good living to be able to make even more money here in the UFC. So she's going to ask for, if not Ronda Rousey money, maybe a little bit more. And when it comes to star power, especially in the women's division, it is needed. And, Dana White's going to have to, bring, I guess, a good protagonist or a good equal to who can potentially maybe compete with Holly Holm. He needs to build some sort of competition within that female division. And right now, this is what he has as his best opportunity, because we don't know if Cyborg can ever make 135, and we definitely don't know what Gina Carano would be able to do if she did come back to the UFC, especially after this long of a layoff.
Yeah, I mean, with the negotiations, Dana White, his ego comes out. I mean, he's not a typical president of a company. His ego's involved, and when you challenge him, he's going to respond, in kind. And I think compared with Guillermo Melendez, where he was coming off a deal, he was already fought in the UFC. He's proven his worth as a Strikeforce champion, and with his fight with Benson Henderson, that was a competitive fight, even though people kind of hate on it. And then, of course, his classic with Diego. It just seems to me, if in fact, the management team of Holly Holm does in fact, request more money, that could ask for trouble. I mean, you know how Dana White is. If your demands are too astronomical, most likely he's going to be kind of persuaded to look to other options.
For whatever reason, I think we will hear good news after these discussions take place. It's just incredible. All points have to lead to something crazy, just because this is, with the news, Holly Holm and Albuquerque, and Diego Sanchez and Albuquerque, and then Carlos Condit and Albuquerque, and it's just got to hype people up, especially from this area, to hear this type of news going on, especially when arguably the two best fighters in MMA to ever come out of the state are in action, and then the greatest female boxer, arguably of all time, from this area is also in talks to be, to actually be in the same organization. It's just pretty crazy, and I think New Mexico fans especially should be pretty excited about this news.
Yeah, it is so weird with this division because people portray this division as terrible with the women's bantamweight class here. And you take a look at the fighters. I mean, Kat Zingano, she's a question mark because of her husband's death and, of course, her injuries.
Yes.
Really don't know what the status of her. Alexis Davis just won her fight. Miesha Tate's pretty much been phased out because she lost to Ronda Rousey twice. Sarah McMahon, she just lost her fight controversially, Sarah Kaufman. I mean, even though the women in this class certainly they have their drawbacks, they're not inferior fighters. So it's just weird to me that the UFC seems desperate to automatically, go to Gina Carano, go to Cyborg. I mean, granted, Cyborg's a fight that you want to make because she's relevant, but certainly Gina Carano seems pretty desperate when you have certainly a decent bantamweight division. I mean, it's not terrible at all.
No, like you said, it's a pretty decent division if you ask me. If you had to stack it up with all the other ones, I mean, it might be middle of the pack, maybe lower tier end as far as the competition within there, but they need names in that division and names that can pose a threat to Ronda Rousey. And even if you don't do the Ronda Rousey-Holly Holm fight right away, give Holm 2 fights before that championship fight, and I guarantee there'll be hype around. If both women, of course, stay undefeated, there'll be some incredible hype behind that, especially because you already have the trash talker, the one that you need the drama from in Ronda Rousey, and you bring in Holly Holm, who has a very angelic nature about her. You're going to have a lot of people go toward Holly Holm, gravitate toward her, and she's going to build a crazy fan base as soon as she gets to the UFC, especially in a build-up in a fight between them. It's almost angel and devil, if you ask me, Jay, if you have to compare the two women.
It is. I think with Holly, she's very marketable because, she's a very attractive girl. That's one. 2, she's a world champion. That brings a lot of, leverage in terms of marketing somebody. She's a world champion boxer. I mean, that's easy for people to understand compared to somebody who, even with Sarah McMahon, who's a world champion wrestler, I don't think, with casual fans, they really know what that means. But if you say Holly Holm's a world champion boxer, for somebody who doesn't really follow MMA, that makes a lot more sense. And I think also, Holly Holm's very well spoken, and she's a very exciting fighter. So with all that in hand, I think she has the ability to be really a huge star in the UFC, if she gets the opportunity. Of course, she'll have to get past Juliana Werner, Legacy FC30, April 4th. That's going to be from the Route 66 casino. But taking a look at Werner's record, I think Holly Holm, safe to say, looking to get the victory there pretty easily. But you never know. It's MMA. And certainly the pressure of meeting with Dana White and all these kind of distractions, it's going to be imperative that Holm keeps her eye on the ball here.
And I definitely agree with you. And, Holly Holm is coming up on 33 years old this year as well. So let's not forget about that.
Yeah, that's true. And that age is a factor because you want to make as much money as possible. And as the longer you wait, it's just you get injured, all these circumstances take place and you miss your opportunity at a title shot. And before you know it, you're retiring and you miss your opportunity. So I think it's imperative to kind of strike while the iron's hot instead of playing the waiting game. Before we get into Canelo Alvarez against Alfredo Angulo, we have our 2-round segment. Anything you wanted to kind of discuss, Jorge? What's been on your mind this week in combat sports?
Man, I think if Saturday might be an epic night for New Mexico sports in general. If the New Mexico Lobos were to win tonight during the recording of this, obviously, and then tomorrow, Friday, and for that Mountain West game to take place, you're going to have Carlos Condit, Diego Sanchez, and the New Mexico Lobos playing that night. This city is going to be crazy that evening.
It is, yeah. A lot of national pride on the line, and we'll preview UFC 171 later. But definitely, I think you take a look at George St. Pierre. His status is unknown, and there's been rumors that maybe he'll return back to the UFC. But for now, he's not there. The welterweight division's wide open, and certainly with Diego Sanchez, there's a lot of goodwill with his defeat from Gilbert Melendez. If he's able to pull a couple of wins together in the welterweight division, he could put himself in position for maybe a title shot. What I kind of have to wait and see. I guess my thing, I don't know. In terms of the welterweight title, I mean, it's pretty historic, right? I mean, this is the first time in a lot of years that George St. Pierre's not the champion. And I guess the question is this the status of this division? I mean, we really don't know where is George St. Pierre in terms of whether or not he wants to continue his fighting career. My vibe is definitely yes. I think with his comments, even though he's been kind of bashing the UFC in terms of drug testing, he's never said that he wants to leave the UFC. I think eventually he's going to return. So I'm just wondering, especially seeing this fight between Johnny Hendricks, a guy that he's beat, and Robbie Lawler, who's considered kind of past his prime. If you're George St. Pierre, this fight certainly is going to have your juices going in terms of, okay, I'm not the number one guy anymore. So I think it's just pretty interesting to see a new era in the welterweight division. I think it's going to be new. Even if George St. Pierre returns, he's going to be the challenger, whoever the champion is when he returns to the octagon. So I think it's going to be fairly interesting to see, two guys fight for a vacant welterweight title. It's still pretty weird. Man, let's get into the action that took place over this weekend, and I guess the big boxing match took place. Canelo Alvarez made his return after his defeat at the hands of Floyd Mayweather Jr. Defeated Alfredo Angulo, a controversial 10-round, I think TKO victory for Canelo Alvarez. He moves to 43-1-1. A lot of controversy surrounding this fight even happening on pay-per-view, and also the actual knockout itself. What were your thoughts of the referee stoppage by Tony Weeks? I believe it was an uppercut that Alvarez landed. Alvarez landed 197 power punches to Angulo's 78. Alvarez landed 58% compared to Angulo's 17%. The crowd booed the finish in the 10th round, 47 seconds into it. It seemed like Alvarez was dominating, but yet the fans didn't want the fight to end. What was your thoughts on the stoppage?
I actually like the stoppage. I'm one of the very few that actually did, but the only reason is because Alfredo Angulo did not pose a threat to knock Canelo Alvarez out in that entire fight. Yes, he made it exciting because he's a move forward kind of guy, and defense always lasts type of mentality, but Alvarez was landing some huge shots on Alfredo Angulo, and even to start the 10th round, there were two instances where Tony Weeks actually looked like he was going to jump in and stop it. And, the first time he did, I was like, I had mentioned to the people I was watching it with, Tony Weeks is going to jump in. He's looking for any chance he can. What surprised me is that he stopped it after a single punch. Did I mind if there was a stoppage, if maybe Canelo landed a 3-punch combination, let's say, okay, stop it. I was very surprised that he stopped it after a single punch. It was a very strong uppercut. Do I disagree with a stoppage happening? No. But do I disagree with it being after a single shot? I do, especially because Alfredo Angulo is the type of guy that can take this punishment. But, Jay, in this situation, I think Tony Weeks was looking out for Alfredo Angulo. And in general, I did not mind a stoppage, to be honest.
Yeah, it's tough. I think a referee stoppage has been in the news in both MMA and boxing. And I'm, like you, Jorge, I'm always going to lead on the sign of caution. I know you were very upset with Herb Dean with his stoppage of the Ronda Rousey fight, but I'd rather have it stopped too early than stop too late. And certainly, I think with Herb Dean, that was a bad stoppage. I agree with you. At the same time, I'm not really that broken up about it because I'd rather see that happen than Sarah McMahon in the hospital and Ronda Rousey killing this girl. Even though that wouldn't be the case if those two continued fighting, I think the fighter's safety is paramount in this type of situation. I think a referee in a combat sport, it's much different than, let's say, a referee, officiating a Lobo basketball game. I mean, a referee blowing a traveling call, 3 seconds in the lane, blowing any kind of last-second shot. There's no one's life on the line. With combat sports, it's different because the fighter's safety is paramount. So, in this specific instance, I agree with you, Jorge. I don't think it's too big of a deal. I think Alvarez had the fight in hand. I do want to ask you a couple of questions about Alvarez, specifically him missing the weight limit at 154 pounds. They had to change it to 155 pounds, and Alvarez had to forfeit $100,000 of his purse. He says he would like to fight the winner of the Sergio Martinez-Miguel Cotto fight in Madison Square after their bout in Madison Square Garden. But I don't know. Can he make this weight limit, Jorge, or he might have to consider moving up?
No, I think he's able to make the weight limit. It's just there's a few things that were happening on here. This is one of the longest layoffs of his career. I mean, he's usually pretty consistent when it does come to boxing, especially early in his career. He'd fight every 2-3 months. Now, this 6-month layoff, I think, was maybe the second, third longest of his career. And you talk about a really young guy who already has 43 plus, or excuse me, a total of 45 fights in his career. So a 6-month layoff is definitely something that he was just not accustomed to, and he took it. And I mean, he suffered the consequences. Let's not make it seem like it's 2 or 3 pounds that he actually missed it by. It wasn't by a whole lot. So I think,
sure,
especially if it comes to a world championship fight against one of those two guys, I think he'll be okay. I think he let a lot of the Floyd Mayweather hype beforehand get to his head, made him think that maybe he was bigger than real life. And in a way, he almost was in Mexico. But hopefully the Floyd Mayweather loss humbled him, and hopefully this fight with Angulo and hearing the crowd's reaction. I'm not sure if you saw this, Jay, but Lazy the Savage was actually ringside with the Diaz brothers, taking footage of the crowd and of the big screen. And after the decision was announced, after the Tony Weeks stoppage of the fight, the crowd automatically erupted. The boos were going off, and the boos started to dwindle a little bit. But when Canelo Alvarez's face came back on the big screens, the boos increased even more. So I'm not sure if Canelo after this, especially or after the Floyd Mayweather fight, is now turning into a polarizing figure. But that was one of the things that shocked me the most about Lazy's video, that as soon as Canelo came back on the big screen, the crowd's boos got as loud as it originally was when the contest was first stopped. It was really weird. I'll see if I can find it and post that up on our Facebook page. That's
pretty bizarre because, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't Canelo pretty much he's the biggest combat sports star in that country, right?
He is, but Alfredo Angulo and his style is very well respected. I mean, it'll be rare that you'll run into a Mexican boxing fan that will disrespect another guy who puts his heart on the line, like Alfredo Angulo. A lot of Mexican fans feel that Canelo may have started to be extremely cocky, especially before and after the fight with Floyd Mayweather. So I think not a whole lot of the Mexican crowd, but because it's not something you're accustomed to seeing out of your fighters, there might be some people turning on him or not as fan favorite of him as he was before. And also, the bandwagoners, the guy was undefeated before he fought Mayweather. They all wanted him to win, and all of a sudden they turn against him. It's just sports in general, man.
Mm-hmm. The undercard featured Leo Santa Cruz in action. He had to overcome a accidental headbutt. He got a cut from that, but he retained the WBC Super Bantamweight title via unanimous decision. Anything notable in that fight that you saw?
Just the fact that unbelievable that Leo Santa Cruz's motor is something like I've never seen before. This guy will throw, in the excess of 70, 80 punches every single round. Just the work is unbelievable, and you just think of how long is this going to last for Leo Santa Cruz and being able to move that much. We knew that Christian Mijares, despite the fact that he was on a pretty good win streak and has beaten world champions before in the past. That's what it was, to see if he can stand up to the 25-year-old Leo Santa Cruz's motor, and he just couldn't. The shots were hurting Mijares. Mijares did a lot of, I don't like calling it running around the ring, but a lot of riding the ropes is, I think, more of a better way to actually call it, especially when you're outmatched in such a way. So, who knows what's going to happen next in this division with Leo Santa Cruz? It's just really tough, especially when you have the Cold War between Top Rank and Golden Boy. Guillermo Rigondeaux is number 1 in this division right now, followed by Leo Santa Cruz. And it's a shame that the two guys will probably never fight just because they're on two opposite sides of the aisle. This division, to be honest, is super bantamweight division that they're both in. It isn't as loaded as a lot of people like to think it is. At least I think it's very international. It's rare that you'll see an American here. Chris Avalos is out of California, is the only guy anywhere in the top 10 or 15 in this. So when it comes to the attention that this division would get, or Leo Santa Cruz would get, he has to move out of the division. Probably move up to featherweight. That might be a big jump for him, especially when you see guys like Abner Modest. Maybe he can fight another Golden Boy fighter, but I doubt that. I think they'll wait maybe another 2-3 years to let that fight happen. One more thing, I know I kind of went off on a tangent. Leo Santa Cruz, that I wanted to say about this fight card, but Jorge Linares back, in the spotlight here. Again, a Venezuelan who, oddly enough, fought a Japanese fighter by the name Nahiro Arakawa. I'd say oddly enough because Linares now has been living in Japan for the last 7-8 years. The guys were actually talking Japanese to each other in the ring, which was pretty interesting to see a Latin fighter and a Japanese fighter sharing that language. But Linares, if people have never seen him before, please look up his fights. It's a thing of beauty to see him box. The only thing is he doesn't have much of a chin to hold him up, but it did hold up against the lighter hitting Arakawa this time around. Linares now becomes a number 1 contender for Omar Figueroa's fight. Everyone knows Omar Figueroa has power, so you're going to have a exceptionally gifted boxer against a nice power fighter when Linares and Figueroa fight. I'm excited about that one happening down the road.
Mm-hmm. Also on the same, day was a UFC Fight Night 37 from England. It seemed like, at least in terms of the numbers, the card did well, at least in terms of attendance. And of course, the main event, the UFC got what they wanted. Alexander Gustafsson easily defeated Jimmy Minowa. Round 2, 118 with knees and punches, technical knockout. After the fight, Gustafsson took the mic away from Dan Hardy and requested a fight with John Jones. What do you think about Gustafsson in terms of this division? Because to me, he's been kind of disrespected. You take a look at his fight against John Jones, heralded as one of the greatest title fights in the history of mixed martial arts, and yet he has to go to England on this fight card. I mean, Dana White can spin this all he wants to, but the bottom line is this is kind of a demotion. I mean, he's on a Fight Pass card that's on the internet, not on network TV and not on pay-per-view. He had to fight a guy who wasn't even ranked in the top 15. I think that's a huge problem. So with Gustafsson now kind of waiting there, what does he do? Certainly, there's Glover Teixeira against John Jones. I've always been on record saying Glover Teixeira is way overrated, but you never know. Teixeira, let's say he puts on a classic against John Jones, and they have to fight again. Something controversial happens. There's Daniel Cormier. I mean, where do you see Gustafsson in this division? Do you see Gustafsson fighting Daniel Cormier, or do you see Gustafsson automatically getting the title shot?
I don't think we've ever, or it's been a while at least, where we saw a situation where one dude fights a guy outside of the top 15 and gets a automatic title fight for the next fight, unless it's barring injury, of course. I don't think we've ever seen that before, and I think this is the case. You mentioned him being disrespected, and he kind of was. You're not televised, so what are you going to do? You're going to grab the mic and try to make some noise. That way you make some noise on social media, and Gustafsson did definitely do that, and by all means, he deserves another title fight, especially after this win. But the way the game's played, Jay, he's going to have to fight someone tough, and I think that guy's going to be Daniel Cormier next. Unfortunately for Gustafsson, because if he does fight him, I don't think he beats him, and he might not see a world title shot, if ever, if not recently, if ever again, which is a sad thing, because Gustafsson did everything in his power to win the world title against John Jones. Even though I didn't have him winning it, I definitely think he deserved a rematch.
Really? So you don't see so Gustafsson loses against Cormier, you don't see him ever getting a title shot again?
No, I say it's going to be very difficult, especially to know the guys at the top, because of the way he's being disrespected, I say. Not because of his talent, but because of the fact he, like you said, he was demoted in a way. It's
sure. This
is like a bounce back fight that you see in boxing. This guy, you see a world champion lose, and he's going to fight a guy who's like 36-7 or something like that. You know what I mean? It's sometimes you see that occurrence in boxing when champions, want to see their way. But here's the difference: in the UFC, you don't get that choice. So if it's got to do something to one's ego to be that disrespected, in my mind.
Of course, absolutely, I agree with you. I think with Gustafsson, though, I think a fight against Daniel Cormier almost serve him well. Now, I think in an ideal world, he would get the next title shot. By just going to Glover Teixeira. But, in reality, I think certainly a matchup where you're trying to market, Gustafsson into some kind of marketable star. I think him versus Cormier, especially if you've seen Cormier kind of on the rise, especially where he fought a nobody. The guy, I'm not even going to say his name on here. He's not even worth the time. But I just feel with Cormier and Gustafsson fighting for the right to fight John Jones, you have two top contenders. I think that fight makes sense. Now, granted, I think both guys are kind of getting a raw deal there, but I think it's what's best for their careers, and it's what's best for the UFC light heavyweight division, considering when Gustafsson fought John Jones, that pay-per-view, it didn't really go so well, at least in my opinion, in terms of pay-per-view buys. It makes sense in trying to expose, the two, up-and-comers, the two top young fighters in the division. It makes sense, in my opinion, even though you are kind of screwing them.
So, what happens? What happens next? Do we have a mini tournament that happens? Let's say Phil Davis beats Johnson? I think that's his next fight. So, do we have a Phil Davis versus Rashad Evans and Gustafsson versus Daniel Cormier? Then the winner will get John Jones. Is that what you think is going to happen?
That'll be fun. I mean, you take a look at this division. There's question marks. Certainly, Little Nogueira is question mark there. Dan Henderson Henderson and Chael Sonnen with the TRT fiasco. Really don't know. Ryan Bader certainly on the wrong end. He didn't have the Jimmy Manoa situation. He's actually ranked 11th, so we kind of cut him too short there. He's actually ranked 11th. Somehow he's ranked 11th in this division. You have Vitor Belfort, who's off TRT, still ranked 12th in this division. Then you have Gegard Mousasi, James Tahuna, and then Rafael Cavalcante. So you got a lot of hybrid guys in the light heavyweight division, a lot of older guys in this division. You take a look at the younger talent, really it's just Gustafsson, Teixeira, Davis, and Daniel Cormier. All the other guys are kind of older or not, honestly, not going to crack the top 10. So I like that tournament idea. I think it kind of hides the lack of younger talent in the division. Hopefully within the next 2 years, we'll see an increase of younger guys in the light heavyweight division. But for now, it's kind of, it's kind of top heavy with a lot of younger talent, and then you see the old guard kind of hogging the middle of the division.
Yep. And that's what it completely is. So, I don't know. I just hope something fair happens for Alexander Gustafsson.
Sure. Also on this card, real quickly, Dana White pretty much destroyed Melvin Guillard in a post-fight press conference, saying he ran the entire time. Guillard loses to Michael Johnson 30-27, 30-27, 29-28. Michael Johnson seemed very angry this fight because it was a chance to showcase his skills, and Dana White called this fight the worst fight of the night. And I think Michael Johnson took it personally and took offense to that.
Do you get a bonus for that award?
Maybe a negative bonus. That'd be interesting. Take the purse away if your fight sucks so badly.
Oh my god.
There'd be tons of controversy, but I'm sure guys will put it on the line more if their purse is going to be affected. That's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And that shock for Michael Johnson, man. He shoots up in a lot and leapfrogs a lot of good guys in that division as well. They're in lightweight.
Mm-hmm. No doubt. I guess let's get to the main card, man. UFC 171. This is probably one of the biggest pay-per-view cards of the year so far. Even though I don't see it doing so well on pay-per-view in terms of buys, but in terms of hardcore MMA fans, I mean, this is as good a card as you can get. I mean, this is a really, really great card from, the prelims to the main card. Lots of good fights on here. I guess we're biased, Jorge, so I guess let's not run from it. Let's talk about the two New Mexico fights on this card. First, Carlos Condit taking on Tyron Woodley, and then Miles Jury taking on Diego Santos. I do want to start with Carlos Condit here. I believe George St. Pierre leaving the division benefits Condit the most in the fact that it's pretty much wide open. We watched this fight together with Condit against Johnny Hendricks, a very close fight, a fight that certainly could have gone either way in our opinions, maybe because we're biased, but it certainly wasn't a lopsided victory for Johnny Hendricks. If Carlos Condit beats Tyron Woodley, by a pretty efficient margin, is Condit the automatic number one contender for the welterweight title?
He is, based off of what was tweeted from the UFC's Twitter account about a week ago. It did mention, and I actually didn't see this till last night, and I was shocked I didn't see this, but the tweet read, and again, I'm just paraphrasing here, Carlos Condit has been told that if he wins, he gets the next title shot. So based off of that, and we know that Carlos Condit has been told he's fighting for a title a couple of times, and it hasn't happened, but based off of that and based because of the fact it was made so public that way, I definitely think that upon a win, he's going to fight for the title. It makes the most sense. He's ranked there at the top. He's been at the top for so long, and because GSP is gone, I think he becomes the automatic number one guy.
I agree, and I think we're on the same page here. Because Carlos Condit and Joe Rogan put it best. He has no weaknesses. He's good everywhere, and I think the only thing that he kind of gets disrespected is his, of course, a takedown defense. But you never seen really with Carlos Condit, he's dominated on the ground except against George St. Pierre. And this fight in particularly against Tyron Woodley, I mean, it's interesting because you see Hendricks dominate George St. Pierre, but yet Hendricks didn't really dominate Carlos Condit on the ground when they fought. With Condit against Tyron Woodley, Woodley's ranked 11th, somewhat lower ranking for Tyron Woodley, a guy that's really has a lot of potential here. Any kind of danger for Condit losing this fight? Woodley hits strong, trains with the Black Zillions, very talented fighter here. Condit's kind of used to this type of hybrid wrestler who can hit hard. This is not anything new to him. In previewing this fight, anything that, if you're a fan of Carlos Condit, you should be concerned about. Yes,
that the fact that this fight is only 3 rounds. It's very difficult, especially when you're fighting a wrestler. Wrestlers tend to wear out the last two rounds in a 4 and 5 round fight, of course. So Woodley's going to come out really tough, and if he's able to control Carlos Condit, especially close, and able to take him down, I think Woodley does not care to make this a boring fight. I don't think. Just because he has a lot riding for him. It's a chance to crack the top 10, and if he wins this, I think move up to maybe even 5th or 6th place here because Jake Shields is fighting that evening as well. And I think Jake Shields is going to lose. So Tyron Woodley could shoot as high as up to 5 places in this division with a victory over Carlos Condit. And I think that's scary for anyone who is a Carlos Condit fan. For Carlos Condit to win this fight, he's going to have to make it boring the opposite way, standing, and just try to pick him apart with kickboxing. I mean, we're at odds here. I don't think we're going to see I shouldn't say great fight, a very, I guess, high-paced, high-action fight at all. One of these guys is going to have to make it boring, either Woodley on the ground or Condit standing up.
You're stealing my line, man. Usually I say the fight's going to be boring. Bring a magazine or a book. But I guess you're saying bring the book or bring a cell phone or something to distract you. This fight sucks.
No, not necessarily. I don't think it's going to suck. I mean, it's going to be a technical fight, whether it's technically on the ground or standing up. I think one of the guys is going to showcase their strength on here, and I think it's going to be a good performance by that other guy. But as far as Woodley, like as I mentioned, if he wants to win this fight, he's going to have to control it on the ground. I'm not saying that, it's going to be boring. I'm not necessarily saying he's not going to do a good job of controlling Condit, but, most fights on the ground, especially with a lot of wrestlers, I mean, no one wants to see a full fight that's just ground and pound from one end.
Of course not. And I think the thing with Tyron Woodley is that when he's never fought somebody like Carlos Condit. And it's cliche, but it's true. Carlos Condit fights every minute of every round. He wears on you. He's just a guy you don't want to fight because the guy never gives up. He has no quit in him, and that's rare in MMA. I think that's kind of a cliche of all fighters. They don't quit. They're full of guts and they never surrender. But with Carlos Condit, it's true. This guy, Tyron Woodley is not going to break Carlos Condit. It's impossible. I'll go on record. It's not going to happen. I mean, if Woodley if he dominates the first round with his wrestling, Carlos Condit's going to come back strong. And I think that's a danger for Tyron Woodley, and that's probably why I don't see Woodley winning this fight. I think it's possible, him getting a 3-round decision, but George St. Pierre is the only guy to dominate Carlos Condit on the ground, and Tyron Woodley is not George St. Pierre, and he's not Johnny Hendricks. I don't see it happening. I do see your scenario with the standing situation. Carlos Condit circling and maybe turning it to fight in a kind of a Nick Diaz situation there. But I have Carlos Condit. I say winning a 3rd-round finish.
Condit?
Yeah, Condit by, I think, 3rd-round TKO.
Wow. And is it going to come from the stand-up or?
I think stand-up. I just think, even if Woodley wins the first round, which is possible. I mean, I like Tyron Woodley. I think he's a great fighter.
So do I.
But I think with Carlos Condit, I mean, we've seen this guy ever since the WC or even earlier than that, that you're going to have to, be on him. Either A, get lucky and somehow knock him out, which has never happened, or you're going to have to completely dominate him on the ground. And I just don't see Woodley in the same class in terms of with Hendricks or Georges St. Pierre, unfortunately.
Jay, the last time Carlos Condit has won a fight by submission, February 13th, 2008.
Maybe it's due. He's certainly deadly off his back. He's active.
He's great off his back. He's one of the best fighters off of his back, especially in this area. Him and Tim Means, unbelievable the way they're able to actually fight off their back. But if Condit's able to get on the ground on his back and able to win this by triangle, that'll be phenomenal. I'm going with Condit via unanimous decision. Is that what and you're going stoppage in the third?
I like the stoppage. I just, we've seen Nate Marquardt finish Tyron Woodley. I think that's certainly in Carlos Condit's wheelhouse to kind of steal a page from his former teammate's book, Nate Marquardt, and to kind of finish him that way. Let's get to the other New Mexico fight. Diego Sanchez taking on Miles Jury. I talked with you about this off air, Jorge, and really a lot of people have dismissed Diego Sanchez. They think he's a weird guy. They think he's just this, a flash in a pan that had a good run after the Ultimate Fighter, but never really turned into a elite competitor inside the octagon. And I think it's kind of disrespectful. You take a look at this guy's record here. I mean, he lost to BJ Penn, who was in his prime. I mean, John Hathaway, really the only bad loss within his last, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Within his last 6 fights, really the only bad loss is John Hathaway. Other than that, Ellenberger, that was a close fight. Takanori Gomi, he got a gift there. A lot of people thought Takanori Gomi won that fight. And then Guillermo Melendez, a Fight of the Year candidate. I think, you take a look at Paul Thiago, which was a dominant performance. Martin Cameron, a classic fight. Diego Sanchez has looked pretty good. And you take a look at all the Fight of the Nights here since the Hathaway loss. Paul Thiago, Fight of the Night. Martin Cameron, Fight of the Night. Jake Ellenberger, Fight of the Night. Takanori Gomi, really a garbage fight. And he missed weight. And the fight itself was at a catch weight of 158 pounds. And then a Fight of the Year, Fight of the Night candidate against Guillermo Melendez. So this guy's been on a roll here in terms of being competitive, but yet people think he's past his prime. Why do you think people have that opinion of him?
I think just because it feels like he's been in the sport forever, especially after he won, the Ultimate Fighter and actually brought Albuquerque and New Mexico and put Albuquerque and New Mexico MMA on the spot. It's, people forget people feel like it was years ago that this actually happened, and it actually was. Of how long it was, how deep he's in, and because of the wars he's been in. Diego Sanchez is a 32-year-old, but it's like, it feels like he's 35, 36 just based off of the number of fights and the number of wars he's actually been in. But here's the thing. The guy has only been stopped once, and that was by, BJ Penn, and it was a doctor stoppage, or else he would have kept going. I think you mentioned it before that Diego Sanchez might be MMA's, Arturo Gatti in a way. Just unstoppable, but still has that heart and is still dangerous. And Miles Jury, I think there are some people, and the odds are very close. Diego is not more than a 2-1 underdog anywhere, and it's for good reason. Just because, to me, Miles Jury really hasn't fought elite fighters. I mean, he did fight Michael Johnson. He did win a unanimous decision, but, was he overly impressive in that fight? A lot of people feel that he wasn't, but especially coming off of the last fight against Mike Ritchie, he only won by a split decision. So if Jury is susceptible to anything, it's a knockout standing up just because Diego Sanchez doesn't realize when he's hurt.
Yeah, that's a really good comparison because both guys put their health on the line, and both guys, it's just as important for them to get the victory as it is to put on an incredible show. And I think it's to both of their detriment at sometimes, But I think it's a good comparison. Who do you have winning this fight? I like Diego a lot in this fight. I think Diego's downfall is not taking guys seriously sometimes. As long as he takes this guy seriously and is free of distractions, I like Diego a lot.
Diego, second round stoppage.
Okay.
I think he's going to come out hard. I'm just saying, Jay, when Diego Sanchez comes out for this fight, I think he's going to rush Miles Jury and try to end it early. And it's going to happen either in the first or second round. I mean, without a doubt in my mind.
That's what's so fun about watching him, right? He takes tons of chances. He's a risk taker. He gets pretty emotional about taking punishment. You see him just get angry at certain times. So I think it's going to be pretty incredible to see what he has to offer Miles Jury. Of course, the main event, Johnny Hendricks against Robbie Lawler. Robbie Lawler in a career resurgence. A lot of people discuss Mark Hunt as one of the biggest comeback stories in the history of MMA. Mark Hunt's never fought for the UFC title before. Robbie Lawler is going to. This is an incredible story, something that no one foresaw. I don't care if you're anybody, no one foresaw Robbie Lawler fighting for the welterweight championship. It's happening against Johnny Hendricks. Any chance of Robbie Lawler winning this fight? I mean, Johnny Hendricks is kind of Lawler's worst nightmare. You know, a wrestler that likes to punch a lot, that doesn't mind getting taken down. Any shot Robbie Lawler has, this is pretty much, you discussed earlier, you know, other guys, you know, their last chance of getting a title shot. I mean, this is truly Robbie Lawler's only opportunity at the title. He'll never get a shot at the belt again. What does he have to do to have a shot here against Johnny Hendricks?
Knock him out. I mean, a lot of people ask, you know, does he have a chance? And, you know, the odds are going against him little by little. He started off as a 2-1 underdog. Now he's a little over 3-1 underdog. But let's not forget, this guy has some power. Out of his 22 wins, 18 of those fights have been by knockout, an 82% victory percentage via KO. It's just unbelievable to have that kind of percentage here, especially in mixed martial arts. So that'll be what he needs. But, you know, will it happen? I don't know, especially with Johnny Hendricks being there in Texas around a lot of friends and family who, of course, will travel from Oklahoma. I think it's going to be a pro-Hendricks crowd. And if these two bang, if they go at it, Jay, we might see either – I think we'll see one of the greatest, you know, 1-2 round fights of all time if these guys really decide to slug. This will not go to a decision, I don't think.
I agree. And I think Johnny Hendricks was to put on a show, too. I just think that comment he said about George St. Pierre, I still don't understand. That's what concerns me. He said, I don't know if you remember this, but he said, yeah, I was only swinging about 75% of my power against George St. Pierre. That's a huge concern because you would think any opportunity of winning the title, you want to use 100% of your power. He wasn't just saying it he was not just saying it because he was trying to conserve energy or was trying to make himself last throughout the fight. He just felt like he was just going to punch George St. Pierre only 75% all the way, and that's a huge concern. So if he comes to fight directly 100%, I think he'll win this fight. But if he takes Robbie Lawler lightly, Robbie Lawler has a chance to knock his lights out. So we'll see. I agree with you, Jorge. I think it could be an entertaining 2-round fight. But I think, unfortunately, in terms of crossover buzz, I think people are just waiting for George St. Pierre to return back to the welterweight division, I'm afraid.
Do you like Hendricks via stoppage then?
I like Hendricks. Yeah, I think, especially if the fight goes, you know, into the later rounds, I think he's very similar to Carlos Condit. He's a guy who's very well conditioned, and I don't see him breaking Robbie Lawler. I think if Lawler's going to win, he's going to have to finish him within the first 3 rounds. If this round goes to round 4, round 5, I don't see Robbie Lawler winning this fight at all.
No, and neither do I. It's just going to it's tough just because especially you want to see this awesome story with the guy disappearing, or not necessarily disappearing, but going into obscurity for a little bit and then going on a tear and, you know, beating, you know, who was supposed to be the golden child in this division and Rory McDonald. But would it be awesome to see, you know, the worst nightmare here is for Carlos Condit, that this fight does go all 5 rounds and it's one of the greatest fights of all time.
It's true.
I don't blame Dana. Dana has done Carlos Condit wrong before, and he'll do an automatic rematch right after. And so I don't know. I'm excited. I like this card. I really like this card. I know I've bashed the last 4 or 5 UFC cards that have taken place. This is a very good card, very good pay-per-view card.
It is. And then you have a women's fight on the Fox Sports 2. That's going to be Jessica Andrade against Raquel Pennington. Weird, because of all the college basketball going on, this card's moved to Fox Sports 2, not Fox Sports 1. So you'll have to catch it on that network. Only about a couple of minutes remaining here, so I want to get to the other boxing card here. A fight that you're not excited to see, but nevertheless is taking place this weekend. Danny Garcia, 27-0, 16 KO. A guy that our guest a couple of weeks ago, Kareem Mayfield, was calling out. Garcia's taking on Mauricio Herrera, 20-3, 7 KO from Puerto Rico. You're not a fan of this fight. I expect you're picking Garcia to easily dispose of Herrera here. I'm
going Garcia, and if it goes more than 6 rounds, I'd be extremely surprised. Mauricio Herrera, who is a tough Mexican fighter here. I mean, he's 33 years old, and he's as he's gone on, he's fighting some tough competition. Kareem Mayfield actually beat him. Mike Alvarado beat him about 2 years ago, and he really hasn't done much to even be in this position to be fighting for a world title fight. But it's likely that Mauricio is ranked in the top 15 of one of the belts, and Danny Garcia has the right to fight him. So I'm not expecting a whole lot out of this fight. It won't show a whole lot. Danny Garcia proved himself, and I thought he was the fighter of the year last year, despite the fact that a lot of publications picked Floyd Mayweather. I think hands down it was Danny Garcia last year who was fighter of the year. And we just got to wait to see what. Hopefully this fight goes and ends early. That way Danny Garcia can be back in the ring here around the summertime. Mm-hmm.
And Deontay Wilder is in action against Mikel Scott. Also, Juan Manuel Lopez taking on Daniel Ponce de Leon. Deontay Wilder, a heavyweight that's been increasingly on the radar of casual boxing fans here. Certainly, he's always exciting to watch for sure.
He definitely is a big guy that can punch. 30-0 with 30 knockouts, somewhat of a padded record, but he has the skills to definitely, be able to compete with a lot of the world champions. Deontay, by the end of this year, I think he should be fighting for a world title. I think it's time. He's due for a world championship title shot already, especially with a 100% victory and KO record. Malik Scott, another guy who has, I think his record's a little more padded than Deontay Wilder's, but he doesn't have nearly the skills that I think Deontay has. 36-1 with 13 knockouts in Malik Scott. So it's not often in the heavyweight division that you'll see a heavyweight with over 30 fights, only have 13 knockouts. It's extremely rare to see a heavyweight. So I expect to see Malik Scott extremely outclassed in this fight. And as far as the other fight, Juan Manuel Marquez and Daniel Ponce de Leon, it's going to be a tough fight for the Puerto Rican and Juan Manuel Lopez, especially because in a way this is a bounce back fight that he's trying to get back in the win column to challenge for another world title. But we've seen his chin tested the last 3 fights, and I think Ponce de Leon might come out with a knockout somewhere in the middle rounds.
No doubt. Well, I think that's going to wrap up our show, man. I'm sorry for everybody that we couldn't get Holly, but there's about 3 weeks left till her fight, so it's not over yet. So our goal is to try to have her on the show before that fight takes place. We have her on the show before, so she's always a great guest, so hopefully we'll have her on before our big bout in April. Anything else, Jorge, you wanted to add before we wrap it up?
That's it. Enjoy the fights this weekend. Go Lobos.
Yep, Lobos are up right now, 73-57 for those who care. As always, you can get in touch with Fight Fans Radio through Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Ustream. You can follow us on Twitter at The Low Blow. We're on Facebook, on facebook.com/LowBlow505. We're also on YouTube, youtube.com/LowBlow505. Of course, that has our interview with Bob Foster. Of course, we're available on email, lowblow505@gmail.com. We're on Spreaker, Stitcher, and on iTunes. Audio of Austin Trout is on our Spreaker and on our Stitcher page, so please go check that out. And, of course, all the Bob Foster content on our YouTube channel as well. So for Jorge Hernandez, I'm Justin Goodrum. You've been listening to episode 182 of The Low Blow. Enjoy the fights this weekend. We will see you next week. Have a good one.
Peace.